I am Lauren Van Hemert, and this is RDU on Stage. And I'm reconnecting with Kayla Pecchioni, right?
Pecchioni.
Pecchioni, who I saw, and a lot of us saw in the Book of Mormon at DPAC the last time it was here. So I'm really excited to reconnect with you and talk about things you've done since and all of the wonderful stuff. But before we get into that, I find this kind of humorous, but I read that you wanted to be a surgeon because your aunt is a surgeon. And I'm wondering, is she still practicing medicine? Is she on the front lines of this thing? And how is your family holding up during this period of COVID?
Yeah, yes, she is still a surgeon. She's one of the few female vascular surgeons in our country. She is obviously she has to be super, super safe.
Mhm.
So she's been really, really focused. And I have a whole family of I guess like her twin sister, my aunt's twin sister is a law professor. So everyone has been, my parents are therapists and social workers, and so everyone has kind of had to pull back, and we've all kind of kept to ourselves because of the time, and everyone has to keep working.
Keep working and stay healthy.
Yes.
It's such a weird time. I'm curious because I saw you on Built for the Stage, on Playbill. You're a trained dancer, you're a fitness enthusiast. So, how does staying fit? I have a very difficult time. I've had a very difficult time maintaining any kind of routine during this pandemic. So, how does fitness play a role in establishing a routine for you?
Oh, it is very integral for any routine that I have. I have an on-off relationship with fitness back before when the world was normal. I would have kind of an on-off thing. If I was working a job, I would get a bit more serious about it. If I'm not, I'm kind of taking a break. But at the top of this pandemic, I mean, there was nothing to do, and I love to eat. But I kept having this thing in the back of my mind that was like, we don't know when the end of this is. And for the purposes of my job, whenever my field is back, I do have to think kind of aesthetically. I do have to think about my health. I do have to think about the effects of whatever happens during this time off. So at the top of pandemic, I was actually home in Kentucky, and I got really back into the game. I was walking about 4 or 5 miles every day. And then as soon as I moved back to New York City, I started working with the Susan G. Komen Foundation and walking in their honor for a challenge for them every day. And through that, I just built up a routine of walking 8 miles nearly every day around Manhattan. And it's
Mhm.
really kept me focused, centered, sane, gets me fresh air, obviously, even though, oh my gosh, my masks are breaking out my face like crazy, but it's a small price to pay. But yeah, it's been integral. And actually, over the last few weeks, just out of pure transparency, I have fallen off that routine, but I am trying to work my way back because it was working so well for me. And at a time where it's now getting colder, I'm trying to take as much advantage of being outside and being able to walk in this free space of Manhattan as much as I can.
And this period of time, I find it kind of ebbs and flows. There's days you wake up and you're ready to conquer the world, and there's other days, at least for me, it's just hard to get out of bed. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah, absolutely. I think what kind of stirred me off track is I went into a job. I had an in-person workshop where we were rehearsing in a studio for 3 weeks. And that gave me routine again. It gave me work again, 9 to 5. I would come home, make my dinner, review a bit, and fall asleep. And then getting spit out of the other end of that, it was like, oh, we got to create our own routine again.
trying to figure this thing out. And you did mention you're an ambassador for Susan G. Komen Foundation. Last week we had a beloved performer, beloved local singer-songwriter, Carrie Marshall, on this program, and she's about to undergo treatment for breast cancer. She
Oh, wow.
was diagnosed during a routine mammogram. So, how has breast cancer touched your life, and how are you working? What are you doing with Susan G. Komen Race for the Cure?
Absolutely. Yeah, I've been an ambassador for Susan G. Komen for the last 2 years, but they've always been a part of my life since I was 9 years old. My grandmother was diagnosed with breast cancer, and she was like, my mom always says, she's like, she loved you the most. She had 3 daughters, and then I was the only granddaughter at the time, or grandchild at the time. And she goes, she loves you the most. And we were so, so close. And it kind of shook my world when she, not so much when she was diagnosed and going through it, because I couldn't quite process that, but when she finally passed due to breast cancer, it was a shift. And so I've carried her with me in so many ways throughout my life. She was the only performer in our family, and I took on performing as a field in her honor. But also at that time, when I was 9, we started walking the Susan G. Komen races,
Mm.
and as a family. And it was so strange and serendipitous. I was doing a show of Book of Mormon a couple years back, and this woman who works for them just so happened to be in the audience, had no idea my backstory with Komen, and she reached out to me on a whim and asked me to be an ambassador. And I was like, you have no idea what this means to me. So yeah, I'm on a team of 30 kind of ambassador influencers in all different fields, and we work yearly to raise money with our little teams. And this year, my team was one of the top fundraisers. So that was really awesome. Really, really cool.
I love that. I've participated a couple of years with a friend of mine's team here, Team Whoop Ass, and it's always a fun event. It's everything's so different this year because everything's virtual and everyone's doing things themselves. But when it's in person and it's that mass gathering, it's just such an uplifting event seeing everybody walking for this amazing cause.
That's the thing too. It's so cheery, and everything is pink, and even like all of the men are in pink, the women are in pink, the babies are in pink, the dogs, the cat, like anything you see is covered in pink, and it's just such a positive celebration, and it really feels like a community experience even if you're new to it. It's so strange. I love that community.
And you can walk, you can run. It doesn't matter how fast or slow you are. It's not an actual race, at least the one I participated in.
Yes,
It
no,
wasn't
you're correct.
everybody hanging out.
Correct. That's exactly it. It's such a chill vibe and just a celebration of what everyone has done, and how strong all these women and men that have come through it are. It's just a celebration. I love it.
It is. It's amazing. And I don't think there's anybody that I know of anyway who hasn't been touched by breast cancer in one way or another. Either you know somebody in your family or somebody's a friend of a friend. We all kind of have a connection to this. So, um,
Totally.
anyway, it's a beautiful cause to be involved in. So I'm so excited about that.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, me too. And I'm ready for another. I'm already planning ideas for next year. So my team is called Kayla for the Cure, if anyone wants to join me.
And I will put links to your social media accounts so people can find you and follow you because I know you're going to have so many. If they didn't see you in Book of Mormon, they're going to be such big fans now and they're going to kick themselves for not seeing you in Book of Mormon. um, Something I've been really thinking about lately is a connection between movement, mindfulness, and creativity because so many creatives that I've spoken to and artists that I've spoken to during this pandemic, including myself, have struggled to create, which is what we all do and what we love to do. So, how do those things intersect for you as an artist? Mindfulness, movement, and creativity.
Yeah. This movement and creativity. I like those words together. It's strange at the top. We were saying before we got on live that at the top of the pandemic, I really felt kind of relieved and exhausted because I just had been working and pushing forward for so long pre-pandemic that I honestly was kind of asking the world for a break. And I hate how this break came about, but it was definitely something I needed was the slowdown. So it took me a really long time to even want to think about getting back to work. I was not that person who was like, when is Broadway coming back? Where can I grab an audition? Where can I, whatever. And I really just needed the slowdown because the mindfulness had to come first. And I needed that and knew that for so long beforehand that I was like, okay, this is that time that I was asking for to really just connect with myself and figure out who I am outside of performing. That's something that we as artists do all the time. We judge our value on what job we're doing or if we're booking something. And I'm definitely a culprit of that and knew that it was something I needed to check with, but I finally got the time. So after, I'm not even going to say that I conquered that. I'm definitely still going through the mindfulness. But I think the best thing that I've learned to do is to listen to myself daily, on a daily basis. If I go, okay, I woke up and it just happens to be a little sunnier than it was before, and I happen to have a little more pep than I would. What if I sang a little today? What if I sang my
Mm.
favorite song that I used to sing for auditions or something today? What if I made content that's not necessarily something that is provided to my agents or furthering my career, just something fun. And exploring that, having the time to do that has been wildly and not only important, but really, really exciting to see in myself.
I love that. And I know you're from Louisville. I told you I was there, right? I was there in February. And while I was there, there was kind of this murmuring about COVID, and nobody knew what that was or what it meant. And we were just like, all right, we're having a good convention to wash hands. That's all it meant for us. And it's such a beautiful city. I wanted to move there and work for the Actors Theater. When I graduated from college. It's also the home of Breonna Taylor, who, unless you've been living under a rock, you know, she's a young woman who was killed in her apartment last March by police officers. Is this, I've only been to Louisville as a tourist, but is this the Louisville you know and remember growing up? Is this a city? I mean, every city has racism. I'm not going to pretend they don't, but this always seemed like this beautiful Midwest city to me. So is this prevalent in the city, or is this just a sad, isolated incident? Is this the Louisville you remember?
Um, it's hard to say. I love Louisville. And we say it Louisville.
Okay, I'm sorry. All
No,
right.
you're fine. We'll always say it Louisville. But I absolutely adore Louisville, the city. Um, but there is, as progressive as Louisville, the city in Kentucky is, it's definitely the one of the largest, most thriving, most accepting cities in Kentucky, but it's still in Kentucky. And I think that's something that I was always aware of growing up. I have a mixed mother and a white grandfather, and I also have parents that are was born with parents that were never together. So my mom went on this incline of kind of rising in society while my biological father kind of lived in, you know, lower income, less the developed areas. And so having those two kind of juxtapositions and also seeing, you know, how people would kind of interact with me and my grandfather and my Black grandmother. And I was always having to be aware of race. and always seeing kind of how in one area at my mother's house, it was a bit less of a, uh, actually a bit more of a thought that I needed to have than it was seeing my biological father in, you know, a lower income kind of run down kind of area, the west end of Louisville. And it's, yeah, I will say it's always something that I have been aware of. As far as police in the city, I've never had to encounter police in the city. Um, but it does not shock me that something like this could happen because there are so many ignorant Kentucky folk in Kentucky, and I've experienced so much ignorance, and I see so many ignorant bumper stickers, Confederate flags, you know, even in this beautiful urban city, you still see images like this pretty much everywhere. I was raised around them and I know them well. So it doesn't shock me that people are on the police force that feel those same things and have those same views.
Sadly, it's just everywhere. I don't think matters where in the United States anyway that you live. I can't speak for other countries, but certainly here it just seems like it's everywhere, and it seems like it's worse now because of our leadership. I try not to get too political, but there.
May as well say it.
um, when you see um, this uprising that we're seeing now in New York, because you're based in New York, even though your hometown is Louisville. Um, when you see this uprising we're seeing in New York, the Dear White American Theater movement, do you think that's going to have an impact on the types of stories we're going to see on our main stages and who gets to tell those stories?
I definitely do think it has an impact. I think that we already see it having an impact in so many different organizations popping up for us. The Broadway Diversity Project, Black Women on Broadway, Black Men on Broadway. We're seeing so many advocacy centers pop up, mega
Mhm.
centers backed by, you know, our leaders and the people that we look at with stars in our eyes, plus everyone else, everyone starting out, everyone new, and they're all inclusive. And so, and we're also seeing the rise of, actually, before I get ahead of myself, a conversation that I was having with my friends as I was going into rehearsals during the pandemic a couple weeks ago. I was having a conversation with them and they said, you know, what do you think is do you think anything is going to change? What you've asked me. And I was like, I don't know. I suspect the rise of the white ally. And it's a funny phrase, but it's also kind of like a nice thing because we are, for the most part in our field, surrounded by white people, and we have always seen, I have very frequently seen, I want to choose my words carefully, I've very often seen them not want to participate or not, you know, leave that as a problem to you, the Black person dealing with the problem in the room, because we all are always thinking, is this going to come back on me? Is this going to come back on my career? And I think that fear has held us back from making a lot of progress in allies and allyship. And it is definitely something that I noticed in the room this time around when I was, we were at the time 5-6 months into the pandemic, and I had already seen certain sensitivities to my costuming, my wigging, my you know, my change or directions in character, altering the speech of that. Looking around a room, seeing that I'm still the only Black person there, and someone a white person coming up to me and saying, you know, I see this happening. I would love to have a conversation about this. You know what I mean? I want to make sure you're comfortable. So already, that was the first gig out the game, and we are starting to have these awarenesses that we did not have before, and feeling comfortable having these awarenesses that we didn't have before. So I don't think that as soon as Broadway comes back, we're going to all change and it's going to be beautiful. No, I think there's going to be so much to work on, but I think luckily we are in a time where many generations across the diaspora are working to break down these kind of collisions, these walls that we have hit again and again, year after year.
I love that. And I think although I think everybody's zoomed out at this at this point, we've all spent our life on Zoom for the last 7 months. I also think that being able to connect and reconnect with performers from everywhere during this downtime and having these kinds of conversations, I think just not just with me, but I'm seeing them in a lot of different places, is really just making the world a little smaller. And that I like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think so too. I think one of the huge benefits of this time is people are kind of removing that film that goes, I just don't want to make myself uncomfortable, or I don't want to make the wrong impression or say the wrong thing. It's just allowing for less. There's a lot of shame and judgment in the media, but the conversations are coming through, and those conversations are allowing people to feel a bit less guarded about keeping things to yourself, or seeing something and not saying something. And that's a beautiful thing.
I think so too. We're living in, so I have kind of a love-hate relationship with Book of Mormon, and I had a love-hate relationship prior to this pandemic. First time I saw it, I think you and I actually had this conversation before. I didn't love it because I didn't get it. Like, I just was so shocked by it, and I was like, I can't even process what's happening. And then the second time I saw it, I really did enjoy it. This was the performance you were in, the national tour at DPAC I guess it's a couple of years ago now, which I really did enjoy. I allowed myself to, I don't know, loosen up and laugh and find it entertaining. Now we're under this umbrella of the Black Lives Matter movement, of this rising up cancel culture. And this summer, Josh Gad, who was in the original Broadway cast, came out and said he thinks a show like Book of Mormon wouldn't be well received now and would need to adapt because of some of its racist undertones.
Wow.
Having been in the show, and it's funny. I mean, this is a beloved show, so it's hard to have this like mixed feelings about it, for me anyway. But having been in the show, how were you able to reconcile some of the themes? And do you think a show like Book of Mormon will be able to reopen under this new awareness that we're all seeing and experiencing?
Yeah, I do think it will be able to reopen, but let me go back. We definitely connected over this first time seeing Book of Mormon story, because I saw Book of Mormon in college, and I was taken by a friend who said, you have to see this show. And I went in Cincinnati, and I sat in a theater full of white people where I was the only Black person I could see. And I watched them laugh at Black people on a stage for 2 hours. That's how I took it. That is how I walked out of the theater feeling. And I was like so confused why I couldn't just lighten up and understand. And then I went through this journey of auditioning for the show and then going through callbacks. And honestly, it was a very fast process. So I had to process all of this in about a week. But as I saw that I could possibly get the job, I spoke with a friend who I knew was in the Broadway show. And I said, how do you do this? And she herself is very, very Christian, Black woman, but very, very, very Christian, very like has trouble saying cuss words, loves devoted and beautiful soul. And so I wrote to her and I was just like, you know, how and me, I'm like trash mouth, you know, like very spiritual, but I'm like, whatever, anything comes out of my mouth. And so for me to feel that way. But anyway, I wrote her and she wrote back to me and she said, well, here's two things that I had to talk with myself about. I had to say, one, God knows your heart. So the things that you are saying are not from your thought processes, your mouth. I said, okay, that's helpful. But she said, two, Trey and Matt, the writers of the show, she said, everything written in that show is backed with a dramaturgical packet and some kind of research. And I was like, oh, interesting. So when I got to the show, I was given this thick dramaturgical packet, and I was really impressed by how smart the show was. And I had not been a South Park watcher before, so I don't, you know, maybe I didn't get the humor, maybe I will, whatever. But having that dramaturgical packet, seeing the show again, working on the show in its depth, I really gained a respect for it that I did not expect to have because it is just comedic genius and a, an offender of all. I mean, they really hit everyone. Not that it's
Nobody's
okay.
scared in the Book of Mormon.
Yeah. Not that it's okay, but they do hit everyone. So with that, I think that the loosening up that we talk about, I just started to really enjoy the aspect of being in a show that was a huge hit, having this really special time in my life, and that seeing people at the stage door. It's not like we ever came across super angry fans or anything, you know, really devoted, beautiful fans who were really sensitive and respectful, and some ignorant ones. But, you know, for the most part, it was such a beautiful experience. But as far as its future, I think that I didn't even know Josh Gad said that statement. And I think he is correct. I think there are some alterations that could be made for the times, you know, just to not leave your audience with a really sour taste. I would hate that because the show is so good in heart. You don't want it to have sour tones because, you know, we're going through such a hard time. So that's really interesting.
And it's funny. It is funny. I mean, it's funny. And I think you and I talked about in our interview how structurally the show is classical musical theater, even though it's a contemporary show.
Yeah. It's
it,
it
yeah.
truly is like it has so many different wild musical references. And me being the theater nerd, you know, I just fell into it and was like, oh, yeah, it's how it's structured. It's so smart. It's so smart that I really respect that material. I do.
I do too, and I did get a newfound respect for it, honestly, after interviewing you, and then through that lens, seeing the show. Really, looking at it critically as a new classic, and so I do hope it comes back and that they don't have to do too much to it because I hope people will take it in the spirit in which it was written.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing. Like we said, I think we're pretty like-minded in thought, and we're both pretty liberal people. But we both saw it the first time and still took a bit of, you know, offense or you know felt a certain way, and we needed kind of the explanation, kind of the oh, go with me to get on board. So not everyone is going to have that. So I understand how it could probably cause some waves.
It's okay. It's okay. Well, and I think when you experience a time like this and there's so many heinous things that have happened in the world, it's very hard to dissect. It's easy to just cancel everything and go, okay, everything has to be canceled because my son said to my husband the other day, "You're going to be canceled if you ever say that again." So, I kind of see it as everything, it's all or nothing. And so I
Yeah.
hope we can start discerning what what spirit things are done in and where people's hearts are when they create art. Not to excuse people who are just ignorant and putting out trash, but something like Book of Mormon, I think we need to give a pass to. A little bit of a pass, maybe with a disclaimer. I don't know, but we'll see.
Yeah, yeah, just a bit, man. Yeah, I'm curious how they're going to, if they're going to do anything at all. Something tells me that they won't, and they'll open and they'll just keep running fine because that's who they are. But
And people love it.
and
People
people
love
love
the
it.
show.
They come back time and time again and bring a friend. And if anyone, if there's any way to get a disclaimer, it is from these people bringing their friends and going, please just watch, please just enjoy the ride. But yeah, there were some talks while I was there, playing around with kind of like maybe how they could, I don't know, am I supposed to say this? I don't work for them anymore. Maybe how they could incorporate like the Ugandans into press and things like that. And maybe, and I think, those ideas are kind of helpful just so it doesn't seem like as much of a shock. I don't know if that's why they were doing it, but something like that even seems like a way of just kind of loosening the blow of like, oh, there are Black people in this show, and and we're making fun of them.
Oh no, yes. I do want to ask you about performing in South Korea, because was it Dreamgirls?
Yeah.
Is that the show?
Yeah.
So many people. So a few months ago, I interviewed Tom Gabbard, who is with the Blumenthal Arts Center, and he has been doing a lot of work around what is happening in South Korea as far as theater goes, and how can we use that as a model for perhaps reopening our theaters here. So what did you learn working in the theater there? What are the lessons you learned, and what are the lessons we can take away from them that might inch us closer to reopening safely?
Yeah. Wow. Oh, wow. So when I was in Korea, it was a wild experience because I was only there with my American Dreamgirls cast and our entire crew, and like backstage team. I mean, everyone, our hair department, our makeup department, our music team, everyone was Korean. And so it was a bit of a culture shock because we were like, oh, all we have is each other in this. And so we had to learn how to work together really, really quickly. And one thing that I will say about being in the Korean being on Korean Broadway, I guess, is they are so disciplined. And I actually somewhere midsummer had a conversation with one of our stage managers in Korea, and she gave me a phone call, and we were talking about the madness of the pandemic, and she was like, well, I'm back at work now. Everything's going pretty smoothly. We're about to open shows. And she was like, the hardest part is wearing the mask. But she said, everyone wears their masks, and no, you never catch anyone with it below the nose. You never catch it with it down. And when I was telling her how common that is here, she was just mind blown. And so I think one thing that the Koreans showed us was discipline. I mean, they are disciplined beyond belief. They hear a rule and you do the rule, and there's like no question around it. So much so that we would just be like, you want to loosen up a little? Or they would be like, you all have rehearsal, and then we'll end rehearsal, and then you can have the room for like 6 hours. And we were all like, we're gonna go home. And they're like, we would stay for the whole 6 hours. They have a work ethic and a durability that may be a little exhausting for them, I've seen, but it's also so inspiring how they come together and they're just like, no, this is for the good of the whole and the good of the show and the good of the team, the good of the country. We're going to wear the mask, we're going to keep the distance, and they're just so disciplined. It's very, the selfish act of it is kind of removed for them, which is nice to see.
It's very nice to see. I wish people would get that memo here so we could reopen things and not have it's kind of ridiculous to me going to theaters, and a couple of theaters have reopened here and are testing the waters with productions, and there's been a couple of signs, wear your mask like this, not like this. And I'm like, why does that even have to be said?
So many signs about it. There's so many, like
Yeah.
it has to be screened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Crazy. So you're a podcaster like I am. So tell me about the podcast.
Newly, so at the top of the pandemic, I went home to Kentucky for a few months, and while I was there, my roommate, she actually did Dreamgirls with me in Korea 3 years ago. We've been so close ever since, and we've always wanted to live together, and so last year we got a place together. Anyway, she was staying here the entire time I was home and kind of stirring and going crazy. And she keeps talking about like, when you get back, when you get back. And one night she called me late at night and I magically picked up my phone because I never pick up my phone. When she called me late at night and she's like, I'm thinking I want to start a podcast. And before we knew it, it was not her podcast anymore. It was ours, and I was co-hosting, and we had a dress rehearsal down and a full like laid out plan. Because if we're gonna do this, we're gonna do this. So I came back to New York, I think 3 weeks after her idea and after our dress rehearsal, and we just got to recording. And so now we have You Good Sis. And
What it's called, and it can be found everywhere, right? Apple, Spotify, wherever.
Yes, we're absolutely everywhere, and it's just a mental health focused, but really fun, pop culture-y, good time, girl time, but we accept everyone kind of podcast and free space, and we're having a blast with it.
On one of the episodes, you talked about, again, we don't talk a lot about politics on this show, but truthfully, y'all have to vote. 2 weeks, people, you got to vote. And here in North Carolina, we've got early voting, so go to the polls and vote. But you did talk about on your podcast some conflicted feelings you had about Kamala Harris. Do you want to share?
Oh, wow. I just be talking on my podcast. No. I mean, definitely rooted in fact, but I have to go back to why I felt that way. I fully, first off, please vote. I made sure that I've kept my Kentucky license this entire time I've lived in New York, so I could vote absentee Kentucky. And I am definitely Biden Harris, 1000%. 1000%. Yes, I sent out my ballot 2 days ago. But I think I'm trying to connect with what we were talking about. I don't have any feelings on around her as our next vice president. I think that she is a beautiful, eloquent honor to have in the VP spot. I really do. And I don't know why I would feel any mixed emotion. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. I think when she was announced, I was interviewing a trans playwright right around the time of the announcement that she was going to be the vice presidential pick, and she had said it's conflicting because some of her rulings, some of her decisions on LGBTQ issues trans issues were problematic, but they're not nearly as problematic as what we've got now. So go vote.
I mean, it's the whole settle for Biden campaign that's going on. You know what I mean? It's it sucks that we're kind of deciding to between two administrations that we are not gung ho thrilled about. But yes, I think that we brought up her history because it is obviously going to come up. People are obviously going to weaponize it and use it as a reason to not vote, use it as a reason to say, well, everyone's bad. And I think that even though there are problematic things in everyone's history, we need her and we need.
Nobody's perfect.
Yeah.
Nobody's perfect.
Times, I'm not speaking for her, but the times are changing so rapidly that it's like, who knows where, well, hopefully everyone's done their research and knows where she stands, but who knows what kind of developments we are going to make under her as opposed to the other. You know, I feel like we are going to get so much further with this team that we have, Biden Harris. So I think it's important to not act like everyone is a saint. Like I know that Biden is being
real people.
Yeah, Biden is being compared to Mr. Rogers right now, which I think is so hilarious because it's like, no, he's not a saint, but we can kind of lift them up and say like, you are our option, and we are going to rally behind you. So I choose that.
Yeah, me too. And I will say he did take his granddaughter to cookout. Did you have cookout when you were here in Durham? He took
I love cookout. I've only had it like 4 times in my life. I love it.
Okay, so he did take his, granddaughter to cookout. So we have to, he's good. He's fine. He had a vanilla milk shake. I'm good.
Everything up in the hush puppies and all the wild stuff on there. I love it.
He's relatable. So
Yeah.
and I do they're qualified, and I think, this is just my opinion. I think they're good people. They're qualified good people, and they're real people. And so we need to vote. Go exercise your right.
That's the most important thing. I think even though we've had outrageous progress in early voting compared to what we've ever had in history, I think it is still important to shove that message out there. We need people's vote. We need people's vote. If you think that your vote does not matter, you are absolutely wrong. I'm so sorry. Please do it for the act of it at least. We need those votes.
Yeah, absolutely. Please. And the arts, do it for the arts. If you love the arts, if you love, yes, just do it. If you love free speech, I'm a journalist, so the attack on journalism and free speech makes me crazy. So if you value those fundamental rights and creativity and art, please just vote.
Especially if you're LGBTQ, if you're queer. I heard a fact today that said 1 in 5 LGBTQ persons are not registered to vote. And I think that we do too much relying on everyone else and thinking that everyone else is going to take care of it. And it's just not the case. They are trying to take away queer rights. And I cannot live in that world. So please, please, please vote.
Do it. All right. So other than your podcast, what's on your pandemic playlist? What kind of music are you listening to?
I've always been a person, I've so rarely been someone to listen to popular modern music, but I am always in the funk, the disco, the groovy 60s, 70s era. I've been clinging to that recently for some reason, and I don't know if it's just reconnecting to like a nostalgia that I need. Because everything is just pushing forward right now. I'm like, no, I need to go back to my parents' music or a nice, but I've been bumping some Earth, Wind and Fire, some Temptations, Nina Simone. I've just been trying to stay super, super grounded with my music. Also mixing in the like newest Lady Gaga and Dua Lipa albums, the Chloe and Halle, those albums. We've gotten beautiful music this pandemic, honestly, this quarantine, some beautiful albums. So those mixed in with all my regular hits.
Okay, so this is going to be like the most important question I ask. What in the world is happening on The Bachelorette? It's crazy, right?
You, you don't know what kind of door you just opened.
my daughter and I watch. Don't come at me on Facebook, please. My daughter and I watch this show, and I use it as a teachable moment to say this is what not to do.
And there are many of those moments. There are many of those moments, but I feel like The Bachelor, I've been watching since season 1, 2001. I was 9 years old religiously. And now I listen to a ton of podcasts. I'm always caught up on the gossip. But it's funny how it has, I want to say evolved, but I'm like, that's almost too progressive a word. But it's evolution over the course of time from being this very romantic, very whitewashed, admittedly, but very romantic, true search for love to just this like, what in the world, almost trash TV, almost Real Housewives-y kind of situation. Even in the way Chris Harrison hosts, it's so like juicy and drama and almost trashy, and I'm still a fan. I still love it. I still debate even if I'm going to make a video for it. Like, I am just a huge fan.
Yes. You got to get on the inside so we can find out.
I'm like, I could be the next Rachel, the first Black Bachelor. I'm like, I could be the next Rachel. It's representation. It's that she's great representation. I love her.
Oh, and she was smart and strong and beautiful, but yeah, every time it's the most dramatic season ever, so we'll have to wait to see what happens.
But you know what, I truly, and I'm gonna just sound like a fan, but it's rooted in truth, I honestly think this will be the most dramatic season ever.
Now you sound like
I'm just auditioning for his job. I'm like, anyone hire me, please. I'll take Chris's job.
Well, we will have to see what happens. We're going into what, the second week or second week?
Week 2. It's happening right now, actually.
Yeah, so we gotta go.
What are we doing here?
But thank you so much. I mean, all joking aside, thank you so much for just hanging out with me and reconnecting with me. I love these conversations and hearing what people have been doing. I hope A Chorus Line does come back. A Chorus Line was your last show before the thing you did during this pandemic. And so I hope that does come back and somehow I get to see it because I love that show.
And it was the most fulfilling thing I've ever done in my life. And it went by so fast. So I'm praying they make some kind of resurgence of that one. It was beautiful. And we just won a Helen Hayes Award, which is their local theater awards. We won for Best Ensemble and Best Direction. So that was a beautiful moment to have in the pandemic.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, and just stay safe and healthy. And I hope to see you on stage again sometime soon.
Absolutely. And we'll have to do this again. I loved having this conversation with you. Thank you so much for having me.